Good afternoon. From the KUOW newsroom, this is Seattle Now. Winter's blowing back in, and a major deadline's closing in on state lawmakers. I'm Paige Browning with a roundup of today's top stories. It's Monday, March 9th. Starting with our head of police. Seattle Police Chief Shon Barnes says officers who help federal immigration agents will be investigated for possible policy violations and put on administrative leave. The issue came up during a city council meeting last week when council member Alexis Mercedes Rink asked Barnes what would happen to officers who decide on their own to work with federal agents.
That would be a violation of our policy, potentially a violation of the law. So that person would be investigated by OPA. Potentially that person could be placed on administrative leave per the collective bargaining agreement.
Barnes says if federal immigration agents question and detain people in Seattle, SPD officers will work to confirm the identities of the agents. But the chief also says that does not mean that police are working with the feds. Now to the legislative session, which is in its final 4 days. Debates expected to stretch into the night tonight on the bill that supporters call the millionaire's tax. It would be Washington's first ever income tax, taking nearly 10% from every dollar individuals make over $1 million. Our state government reporter, Sarah Mises-Tan, has more.
Governor Bob Ferguson said late last week that he would sign the version of the bill that the House is debating. That's after revisions he asked for that dedicate more revenue to childcare, schools, and sales tax breaks. Legislators could make more changes. Over 80 new amendments have already been filed for consideration before the final vote. Democrats who generally support the bill say they'd like to add changes like earmarking funds for education, more tax breaks for parents, and safeguards to ensure the tax won't extend to incomes under $1 million. Republicans say they'll keep fighting the bill. They think the income tax proposal should go to voters. In Olympia, I'm Sarah Mises-Tan.
What didn't become law this year can say almost as much about the state as what did. Here are some of the bills that died, along with hundreds of others. A measure to require federal immigration agents to get a court order before entering schools and healthcare facilities. A bill that would have required more reporting and documentation by the privately run ICE detention center in Tacoma. Also, a ban on corporate home buying, a medical debt interest cap, and protections for elected officials facing political violence. The session ends Thursday. Here's a surprise we didn't see coming, nor did the city attorney. Seattle City Attorney Erica Evans says her office has inherited an unexpected backlog of more than 5,000 cases. Amy Radel explains.
Evans says she's surprised to find that more than 5,000 cases referred by Seattle police didn't receive a charging decision under her predecessor, Ann Davison. Davison confronted a similar backlog. She ultimately dropped nearly 2,000 cases that didn't involve crimes against people. Evans says she's not planning a similar step.
I will be clear, we will not be dismissing thousands and thousands of cases. It's not something that's fair to community and victims of crimes.
But Evans says her priorities will be new cases as they come in and violent crimes in the backlog, including 1,700 domestic violence offenses. Evans says she also plans to be more selective on which cases proceed to trial. She says ultimately the office will need more prosecutors. Amy Radel, KUOW News.
Governor Bob Ferguson appointed the Washington State Supreme Court's newest justice today. Theo Angeles will be replacing retiring Justice Barbara Madsen. Angeles has spent the last 25 years as a lawyer, doing both pro bono work for immigration cases and general litigation. He'll be the first justice of Middle Eastern descent when his appointment begins on April 4th. Today, President Trump gave a news conference on the war in Iran. Here in the Northwest, the war's effects are starting to show up in myriad ways, one of them being gas prices. The cost for a gallon continues to climb, and it costs an average of $4.63 in Washington state, according to AAA. That is 26 cents more than a week ago. Gas prices have been rising steadily since the U.S. and Israel launched a joint attack on Iran. Washington state does not get gas directly from the Middle East, but oil is part of a global market of which disruptions can increase prices everywhere. There are more reasons than one to watch the weather this week. Western Washington's getting hit with another blast of winter weather today, with snow expected at elevations around 500 feet and higher. Dana Felton's with the National Weather Service in Seattle.
We're not expecting anything in the way of accumulations other than just the dusting on the grass or in the street.
Felton says to expect the same scenario tomorrow morning in the lowlands with little chance of snow accumulation. But after that,
then we're going to get a system come in Tuesday night into Wednesday, and it's actually going to be quite wet. For the lowlands, it's going to be straight rain. For the mountains, between like Tuesday night into Friday, we could see anywhere from 2 to 4 feet of new snow in the mountains.
Felton says to watch out for potential blizzard conditions in the Cascades. But all the while, overall snowpack remains historically low, and that could impact orchards this summer. Northwest Public Broadcasting's Renee Diaz has the story.
There's not enough snow in Washington this year, according to Washington's Department of Ecology. This winter continues to be warm and wet. Lee Calsitz is an associate professor at Washington State University's Tree Fruit Extension Center in Wenatchee. He says snowpack in the Cascade Mountains typically melts gradually throughout the summer, which supplies rivers with water needed for irrigation.
There's no areas of Washington State right now where the snowpack is even approaching normal. Without that snow, in the late summer, we run out of water.
He says irrigation restrictions have occurred in past low snow years. In severe cases, orchards without senior water rights may not receive enough water. I'm Renee Diaz reporting.
Renee Diaz reports for NWPB and the Wenatchee World as a Murrow News Fellow. Health officials say norovirus-like illness has been linked to shellfish from Whatcom County. According to the Seattle Times today, oysters and clams harvested in Drayton Harbor have been recalled. The raw oysters and manila clams in question were harvested between February 13th and March 3rd. The state health department says they were harvested by the Lummi Indian Business Council and were distributed to restaurants and food stores. Drayton Harbor is closed to harvesting until March 24th. A few shorter stories to keep you up to date on tonight. A lawsuit will stay alive against Ticketmaster and its parent company, Live Nation. Washington State and 25 others, plus the District of Columbia, plan to continue their antitrust lawsuit seeking to break up the companies. That is despite a new federal settlement that forces Live Nation to sell 13 amphitheaters and allow local ticket seller competitors. Also still alive, Rad Power Bikes. GeekWire reports the new owner of the Seattle company plans to rehire staff and give the e-bike maker a fresh start and maintain the flagship location in Ballard. The company rapidly collapsed late last year amid rising costs and stalling demand. And finally, in sports news, Seahawks fans are saying goodbye to Super Bowl MVP Kenneth Walker. Walker hit free agency today and left the Seahawks to sign with the Kansas City Chiefs, according to the NFL Network. Walker will get a 3-year deal worth up to $45 million. Next time on Seattle Now, Washington State has had 26 cases of measles this year. That's more than double the number from all of last year.
For all of the cases where we know the vaccine status, all of those people were unvaccinated. So it is a disease of unvaccinated individuals.
We'll learn more from UW Medicine's Dr. Helen Chu tomorrow morning. That's all for today from the KUOW newsroom in Seattle. Our producer is Brooklyn Jamerson Flowers. I'm Paige Browning. Seattle Now and KUOW are members of the NPR network. Have a great week.